I always thought we'd spend every birthday together, not because we were inseparable, far from it. We were twins, but complete opposites. Julia was loud, glittering, magnetic. I was quiet, bookish, always lingering on the edge of whatever room she commanded. But even with our differences, we shared one thing: a birthday. And no matter what else was going on in our lives, we always came back to that. Every single year. Until this one. I found out about her party the way most people did. On Instagram. There it was. A glitter bomb exploding on video, an invitation spinning in slow motion, all black and gold foil, bold typography screaming across the screen. Julia's Dirty 30. The location was listed as undisclosed. The dress code, black tie sparkle. The guest list, private. At first, I laughed. Surely this wasn't the party, not our birthday. I waited for her text. Maybe she had something else planned for the two of us. Maybe this was just a pre-party or an influencer stunt. Maybe. But the days ticked by and nothing came. No message, no call. So I reached out. I texted, "Hey, saw your invite post. What's the plan for our birthday this year? Just let me know if I should book a flight." I kept it casual, light, pretended I wasn't already spiraling inside. That message sat on, delivered, for hours. Then half a day. Finally, 12 hours later, she replied. Her text said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd want to come. It's mostly my people, loud crowd." I sat there staring at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I read it again, then a third time. She didn't think I'd want to come? I wrote back, "Wait, you're doing a birthday without me?" Her answer came quickly this time. She wrote, "I didn't mean it like that. It's just a party. Don't overthink it. It's just a birthday. It's just a birthday." That sentence hit me in the chest harder than I expected, because it had never been just a birthday to me. It was the one tradition we never broke, no matter how strained things got between us. Even the year I had pneumonia at 22, she brought cake to my bed. At 25, when she was studying abroad in Paris, she called at midnight my time so we could blow out candles together over FaceTime. Even last year, when we hadn't spoken in months, she'd sent flowers and suggested a dinner halfway between our cities, just to keep the streak alive. And now, nothing? I didn't respond after that. What could I say? She had already closed the door, and somehow it hurt worse that she didn't slam it. It was left just barely ajar, like maybe I wasn't even important enough to shut out properly. 3 days later, the real party hit social media. Post after post flooded my feed. Julia, dressed in a rhinestone bodysuit, striking poses under a custom neon sign that read, 30, flirty, and thriving. Her arms wrapped around girls in glittering gowns, their glasses overflowing with champagne, a rooftop in Los Angeles, a jazz pop remix playing in the background, towering floral arrangements, gold balloons, fireworks. In one video, someone shouted, "Happy birthday, Jules! You deserve the world!" Another post used the hashtag #twinniversary, as if I didn't exist. I muted her. Then I muted every friend who reposted the party. I tried not to look, but curiosity won. I watched the videos in silence, sitting on my worn leather couch in Seattle, a glass of red wine in my hand. The birthday tradition was broken, and not just by accident. She wanted it this way. I wish I could say this came out of nowhere, but it didn't. Julia had always been the golden girl, the one everyone noticed, the one our parents doted on, whose dance recitals were family events, whose prom dress was custom-made. Me? I was the quiet twin, the shy one, the smart one, if someone wanted to be kind. The one teachers always forgot was related to that Julia. As we got older, the difference became sharper. She went into marketing and became a lifestyle influencer practically overnight. Hair tutorials, brand partnerships, yoga retreats, paid to smile at things she didn't believe in. I went to college for computer science and design, built quiet things, Back-end systems, user interfaces, algorithms. When I dropped out junior year to pursue a business idea, no one noticed. Not even our parents. I got one text from Julia that said, "So wait, you're quitting school now? That's random." And when I didn't answer, she didn't follow up. The space between us grew. Still, I always held on to our birthdays. It was the one day I thought I could count on. The day she remembered we were twins. I used to think that meant something to her too. I guess I was wrong. On the night of our birthday, I stayed in. No party, no glitter, no rooftop. Just the soft hum of rain against the window, a blanket, and the wine Daniel had brought over last weekend. Daniel. He was the one person who had seen all of me from the beginning. He never asked me to talk louder or dress flashier. He understood that silence didn't mean absence, and that not all power came in sparkles. He texted me around 8 p.m. that night. He said, "I know it's your birthday. Just wanted to say I'm really proud of you. Come over if you want company." I stared at the message for a while. Then I grabbed my keys and left. We spent the evening on his balcony overlooking Lake Union. We talked. Or, more accurately, he talked and I listened, which was how it usually went when I needed comfort. He said, "You told me once that you never felt seen. I just wanted to say, you are. By me." That night, I cried quietly into his shoulder. Not because of the party I wasn't invited to, but because for the first time in years, I felt like I mattered. The next morning, I woke up different. Not bitter, not angry, just clear. Julia had her birthday. This year, I was going to have mine. Growing up with Julia meant living in someone else's spotlight. Even when we were little, I understood the pecking order. She was the bright twin, sunny blonde hair, bubbly laugh, blue eyes that sparkled when she batted her lashes just right. I was the other one. Darker, quieter, the girl who'd rather read under the table than sing at the dinner party. People noticed her. They forgot me. Our mother once joked that Julia came out performing and I came out proofreading the birth certificate. Everyone laughed. I didn't. Julia wasn't just admired, she was adored. Teachers raved about her spirit. Neighbors called her a firecracker. Our father used to say she could charm the paint off the walls. And she could. She had a presence. People wanted to be around her. Me? I had to earn every second of attention. And usually, I didn't even try. I learned early on that there was no competing with someone like Julia. It was easier to disappear. We were opposites in every way. She joined cheer. I joined robotics. She went to prom in a limo with a crown on her head. I went to prom because my math tutor's cousin didn't have a date. She posted daily selfies and got sponsorships before the word influencer was even mainstream. I coded entire websites under anonymous usernames and published design guides no one knew were mine. Julia was cruel in small, polished ways, always with a smile. She'd call me professor in front of her friends when I wore glasses. Once, when I was 15, I wore a sleeveless dress to a family dinner, trying for once to fit in, and she leaned over and whispered, "You know, some people just aren't meant for that much exposure." I laughed it off like I always did. Our parents didn't notice, or maybe they chose not to. After all, that's just how sisters are. So I stopped trying, and I started building. By the time I turned 21, I had already launched my first startup. It was nothing flashy, just a project management tool for small creative teams. But it solved a real problem. Within 6 months, a handful of boutique agencies were using it. No one in my family knew. At 23, I landed my first round of funding, $200,000 from a quiet investor who liked my no-nonsense pitch and even less nonsense product. I reinvested every penny into growth. At 25, I dropped out of college. I remember that phone call with Julia so clearly. I told her, "I'm leaving school to work on something full-time. It's doing well." She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Wait, you're quitting school now? That's random." And that was it. No curiosity, no support, just a scoff and radio silence. What she didn't know was that by then I had 12 employees, 3 product lines, and a waitlist of clients begging for early access. I kept everything private, not to be mysterious, but because I had learned long ago that my family didn't listen unless the story came with sequins and applause. So I stopped telling them my story. The company exploded during the pandemic. While Julia was posting self-care routines from her luxury apartment, I was up at 3 a.m. fixing servers and scaling operations. We went from 12 employees to 80, then 200. We hired quietly, expanded globally, and by 28, we hit a $1 billion valuation, unicorn status. I still remember the day my lawyer called to tell me we'd closed the final round. He said, "Congratulations, you're one of the youngest female CEOs of a billion-dollar company in the country." And I just sat there, on the same couch where I'd seen Julia's birthday party go live just months earlier. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer, I just let it wash over me. All the birthdays, all the jokes, all the times I'd been told I was too serious or not marketable. That night, I made myself dinner and watched the snow fall outside my window. And then I called Daniel. Daniel had been in my life for 3 years at that point. We met at a tech conference in New York. During a panel I almost skipped because I thought I wasn't CEO material. He sat next to me during the keynote and noticed I was sketching wireframes in my notebook instead of taking notes. He said, "You're not here to be impressed, are you?" I said, "No, I'm here to see who's faking it." We laughed. He asked for coffee. The rest unfolded like a quiet, steady blueprint. No drama, no games, just a love that felt like gravity. He was successful in his own right. A venture capitalist who had walked away from Silicon Valley to build ethical funds for minority founders. Handsome, self-made, grounded. But more than anything, he saw me. He didn't care about the spotlight. He cared about the girl who used to write code until her fingers cramped. The one who still second-guessed herself at the dinner table. The one who had learned how to survive without applause. Last winter, he proposed. We were hiking in Iceland, and he handed me a ring shaped like a circuit board, nestled in a box made from repurposed steel. I didn't even say yes. I just cried into his jacket until my words came out. Now, as Julia's party photos circulated the internet, perfect, polished, plastered across every algorithm, I started making plans of my own. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because I finally realized I didn't want a seat at their table. I wanted to build my own, so I planned an engagement party, a celebration of everything I had built, not just the company, but the life, the love, the peace. It would be elegant, intimate, remote, a ski lodge in the Alps, close friends, loyal mentors, chosen family, champagne, yes, but also homemade pasta, a fireplace, hand-picked playlists, and no phones allowed during dinner. The guest list was small, deliberate, my aunts, a few cousins, the ones who always checked in, even when Julia stole the oxygen in every room, the ones who sent me books as a kid instead of Barbies, the ones who remembered my name at holidays without having to be reminded. Julia wasn't invited. And this time, I didn't feel guilty. This time, I wasn't the shadow, I was the host. And this time, the world would finally see who I was, without her there to take the light. The view from the chalet was surreal. Outside, the Alps rolled into the distance like a frozen ocean, soft curves of snow blanketing the mountains beneath a watercolor sky. Inside, the lodge was warm with candlelight and conversation. Oak beams stretched overhead, garlands of greenery wrapped around them like ribbon. The scent of mulled wine and rosemary filled the air. This was my engagement weekend, my celebration, my world, and for the first time in 30 years, I was the golden girl. Daniel and I had flown everyone in 2 days ago, 24 guests, handpicked with care. There were friends I'd fought through startup hell with, cousins who called on every birthday no matter how far I moved, former professors who used to tell me, "You don't belong in the background." Even my old piano teacher, who brought her husband and cried when she hugged me. And yes, my parents. I debated inviting them. I truly did. They hadn't seen me in over a year, and I wasn't sure they even remembered what city I lived in. But Daniel, ever the peacemaker, said, "Let them come. Let them see you now." They had arrived cautiously, still dressed like they were attending Julia's country club brunch. Mom in a pastel wrap dress that didn't match the weather. Dad with a polite smile and a confused expression when I hugged him. They thought it was just a dinner. By the end of the first night, they realized it was something else entirely.
The lodge glowed with understated elegance. No garish signs, no influencers filming content in the corner. Just soft music, firelight, gourmet meals, and quiet intimacy. My name was on the welcome gift tags. Our initials were stitched into every robe. The guests greeted me like I was someone important, someone they respected. At first, my mother seemed thrown off. She kept blinking around the space like she was searching for someone else. My father stayed glued to Daniel, asking about the wine and the view, then finally whispered to me, "You really pulled this off, kiddo. This is impressive." By day 2, the tone shifted. People toasted me at dinner. They shared stories about how I built my company from nothing, how I'd changed their careers, funded their research, mentored them through chaos. My cousin Michaela stood and said, "You've always been the smartest person in the room. It's about time the room noticed." There was applause. I caught my mother watching me from the other end of the table, her hand still hovering near her glass, eyes a little glassy. After dinner, she approached me near the fireplace. She said, "You know, I never realized you had such a presence. You always kept to yourself." I answered quietly, "I wasn't trying to hide. I just wasn't loud." She smiled, awkwardly. "Well, maybe I should have listened harder." The next morning, she asked if we could take a photo together. That had never happened before, not even at my graduation. And I let her, because something in me still wanted to believe we were healing. By that evening, it was undeniable. My parents were seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. I wasn't just Julia's sister anymore. I wasn't the nerd, the background character, the girl who never quite fit the family mold. I was the woman who had built something brilliant, and found someone brilliant to share it with. Daniel noticed the shift too. As we walked out onto the balcony together, watching snow fall in gentle waves, he pulled me close and said, "You're glowing." I said, "I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to exhale." But it wasn't all perfect. The next morning, while people were relaxing before brunch, I got a message request on Instagram from Julia. All it said was, "Seriously?" I stared at it for a while. I didn't answer. An hour later, my phone buzzed again, this time a text. Julia wrote, "Saw the photos. Ski chalet, champagne, designer gowns. Did you really throw a whole engagement party and not invite me?" Then, "You're acting like a child. I thought you didn't care about all this stuff." And finally, "You're being petty. You couldn't handle not being the center for once, huh?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened Instagram. I had barely posted a thing all weekend, but someone had tagged me in a video. It was Michaela, my cousin. She'd filmed the toast from the night before. In it, I stood at the head of the table, thanking everyone for being there, voice steady but full of emotion. I heard myself say, "Most of my life, I've been called quiet, small, background. But I've learned that you don't have to shout to be powerful. You just have to show up for yourself. And I'm finally here." The video ended on everyone clapping. I imagined Julia watching it, her phone gripped tight in that same hand she used to flip her perfect hair back in high school hallways while I tried to disappear behind lockers. I imagined her realizing that for the first time, she had been excluded. She wasn't the center. She wasn't even in the room. I imagined her feeling the very thing she used to make me feel. Disposable. And I won't lie. A small part of me enjoyed that. Because no, this wasn't about revenge. Not really. But it was about reclaiming something I had been denied over and over again. The right to take up space. The right to be celebrated. The right to define myself outside of her shadow. Later that evening, after the snow had deepened and the guests were lounging with blankets and tea, my father pulled me aside. He said, "You know, your mother and I were talking. We always thought Julia was the leader, the star. But seeing you like this, you're something else." I smiled. He continued, "You have class, presence, and all this. You built it without anyone clapping for you. That's rare." Then he said something I never thought I'd hear. "You were always the strong one. We just didn't see it." It should have filled me with warmth. And for a few hours, it did. But somewhere, buried deep under that praise, a question began to grow. Why did it take all this for them to finally see me? Would they still be saying these things if I hadn't hosted them in $1 million chalet with a fiancé who looked like a Bond actor? Would they have said it when I was broke and scared and building from scratch? Would they have said it if Julia had been here? That night I looked around the room, the firelight, the people, the champagne still bubbling in tall flutes, and I felt something I wasn't expecting. Not victory, but distance. The celebration was perfect, but the people applauding now weren't the ones who had clapped when I had nothing. And I couldn't ignore that truth forever.
It hit me the morning after the final toast. The lodge was still, quiet in that post-celebration way. Empty champagne flutes on the mantel, folded blankets on chairs, half-melted wax dripped onto the table runners. Outside, the snow was falling again, soft and slow like it had all the time in the world. Daniel was still asleep upstairs. Most of the guests were packing or grabbing coffee in the lounge. I stood alone by the fireplace, watching the dying embers flicker low, and suddenly, I didn't feel like the woman who had just hosted the most incredible weekend of her life. I felt like a child again. The one who used to wait at the foot of the stairs during Julia's birthday parties, pretending not to care I wasn't allowed to hang out with her friends. The one who always cleaned up after the celebrations, never once asked to join the spotlight. I thought those feelings were gone. But now, with everyone gone quiet and the compliments fading into silence, I realized they'd just been buried. My phone buzzed. It was another message from Julia. "So you're not even going to respond?" Then, "I'm your sister. You're acting like we're strangers." Then finally, "Whatever. Guess money really does change people." That one made me laugh. As if I had changed. As if she hadn't erased me from our own birthday first. As if she hadn't spent 3 decades treating me like I was optional. I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. Not yet. That afternoon, just before our guests left for their return flights, I invited my parents to sit with me in the reading room. I wanted to talk to them, not perform for them, not accept praise, just talk. They arrived together, still glowing from the weekend, their coats folded over their arms like tourists leaving a 5-star resort. My mother said, "Honey, this has been so magical. I had no idea how successful you'd become." My father added, "You really pulled it off. We're proud of you." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before I spoke. "I know you're proud now," I said softly. "But where was that when I needed it?" My mom blinked, unsure. "What do you mean?" I said, keeping my voice even. "I spent my entire life being told I was the quiet one, the background twin. You all acted like Julia was the sun and I was some shadow next to her. And when I made choices you didn't understand, dropping out of school, starting my own business, you didn't ask. You didn't encourage me. You barely checked in." My dad sighed. "That's not fair. We didn't mean to make you feel—" "But you did," I interrupted. "And you can't pretend you didn't. You celebrated her every move like it was gold. You showed up for her, even when she was mean, even when she left me out." My mother's mouth tightened. Julia didn't mean to be hurtful. She did mean it, I said. She always meant it. She made me feel small on purpose. And no one said anything. You called it sisterly teasing. You told me to toughen up. You let her take up the whole stage and told me I should be grateful to sit in the audience. The room went very still. I hadn't raised my voice. I didn't need to. I'm not angry, I continued. Not anymore. But I'm not pretending either. I built something beautiful in silence because I had to. Because I knew that if I waited for approval or applause, I'd never move at all. And now that you're proud of me, now that I've made it, now you want to treat me like I've always mattered. But that's not how this works. My mother looked down at her hands. My father said, "We didn't know how much you were hurting." "I know," I said. "And that's the point. You never asked." They didn't defend themselves after that. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they finally realized that this version of me, composed, clear-eyed, successful, wasn't going to shrink back into the one who used to apologize just to keep peace. My mother finally said, "What do you want from us?" I looked at her and said, "Nothing." Not in bitterness, but in truth. I don't need anything. I just wanted to say it out loud. Because for 30 years, I let all of you decide who I was. And now, I get to decide. They didn't speak, and I didn't fill the silence. After a moment, I stood. "I'll walk you to the car." Outside, the air was clean and sharp, snow crunching underfoot as I led them to the waiting SUV. They gave me a long hug. It was real, I think. Or at least it tried to be. And then they were gone. That night, I curled up beside Daniel on the couch and told him everything, word for word. He didn't try to fix it. He just held my hand and let me unravel. Then, right before we went to sleep, I opened Julia's message thread one last time. I wrote, "You told me it was just a birthday, but you knew what it meant. You erased me because it was easy. And now that you're the one being left out, you suddenly care. I'm not being petty, I'm being free." And then I blocked her. Not to be cruel, but to be done. Because if this weekend taught me anything, it was that I could build joy from scratch. I could build love and loyalty and light without the people who had once decided I was too dull to matter. My parents could have their guilt. Julia could have her spotlight. They all had each other. And I had something better. I used to think closure came in the form of some big dramatic apology. A letter, a tearful conversation. A family dinner where someone finally says, "You were right all along." But now, I know better. Closure is quiet. It's waking up in the morning beside someone who sees you, really sees you, and not needing to explain why that matters. It's walking into a room you built, standing tall in the life you created, and feeling no urge to ask for anyone's approval. It's knowing, deep down, that you no longer need the people who once made you feel small. That's the space I live in now. After the engagement weekend, Daniel and I stayed behind in the Alps for a few extra days. No phones, no emails, just the two of us, bundled in wool and fleece, hiking through silence, sipping tea in the mornings, cooking simple dinners at night. We didn't talk much about my family. He knew I needed stillness more than I needed analysis. He'd hold my hand or brush snowflakes from my eyelashes and just let me be. One afternoon, sitting by the fire, he looked up from his book and said, "You know, you don't have to carry that weight anymore." I nodded. I know. But knowing it and believing it are two different things. It wasn't until we returned home, back to Seattle, back to the little house with the dark green shutters and the cozy den filled with books, that I truly felt it settle in. The weight was gone. My family tried to reach out a few times. My mom sent a message saying, "Let's do lunch, just us." My dad forwarded an article about women in tech and added, "Thought this reminded me of you." I didn't respond. Not out of malice, just peace. I didn't need them to try now that it was convenient. I had spent too long earning love that was always conditional. The moment I failed to meet their expectations, or threatened their Golden Girls spotlight, I was disposable, forgotten. Julia didn't reach out again after I blocked her. I imagine she's still telling herself I overreacted, that I made a big deal out of just a birthday. I'm sure in her mind, I became some version of a villain, bitter, ungrateful, full of pride, and that's fine. Let her have that version. Let them all have each other. I've learned that some families love through convenience, not commitment. And when you stop playing your assigned role, they don't know how to love you anymore. That's not my burden to carry. In the months after the party, my life didn't just continue, it flourished. The business crossed another threshold. We expanded into 3 new markets. My CTO, whom I'd recruited from an underfunded community college 5 years ago, was the main speaker at a keynote of one of the biggest tech conferences in the country. I cried watching her speak. And Daniel became my home in every possible sense. He surprised me with a quiet ceremony. No photographers, no guest list, just us, 2 witnesses, and a golden afternoon in a flower-filled field behind our cabin in Washington. I wore a simple ivory dress, he wore a charcoal suit, and we wrote our vows with ink-stained fingers at sunrise the morning of. He promised to love me even when I doubted my place in the world. I promised to love him even when I doubted myself. Afterward, we sat on a picnic blanket, barefoot in the grass, eating lemon cake from a wooden plate. And I thought, this is what it means to be chosen. Not tolerated, not accepted conditionally, chosen. A few months after the wedding, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small square of cardstock with gold cursive that simply read, "Happy birthday. I hope it was everything you wanted." I knew it was from Julia. And for once, I didn't feel a rush of anger or longing. I just folded the card in half, placed it in a drawer, and moved on. Because this year, my birthday was everything I wanted. I spent it in a sunlit villa in Tuscany with Daniel and our closest friends. We made homemade pasta, we danced in the courtyard, we drank too much wine and played board games until midnight. They surprised me with a cake shaped like a laptop, and everyone took turns sharing their favorite memory of me from before I was famous. And I realized these people had loved me before the company, before the chalet, before the glow-up. They had loved the quiet, unsure, awkward girl who used to apologize when she spoke too long. And now, they loved the woman who didn't apologize for anything. That night, as we watched the stars over the vineyard, Daniel pulled me close and asked, "What are you thinking about?" I smiled and said, "Just how long it took me to stop shrinking." He kissed my forehead and said, "You're not small anymore." But the truth is, I never was. I was just surrounded by people who refused to see it. And now that I've built a life outside of their vision, I can finally say it. I was always enough. They just didn't have the eyes to see it. But I do. Now, I do. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you from? And did you think that story was great, bad, or medium?